Hey everybody, after my video yesterday on Genesis 19, I predictably had a number of people retorting, yeah, but what about Leviticus 18 and 20? And I have three concerns with that retort. The first is that my video pretty clearly and explicitly argued that Genesis 19 is not a condemnation of same-sex intercourse. It was not an argument that there is no part of the Bible that condemns any type of same-sex intercourse. My second concern is that these were overwhelmingly conservative Christians, which means this passage doesn't apply to them in any way, shape, or form, and so their leveraging of it as a rhetorical weapon against the LGBTQ plus community is arbitrary and capricious. Now, some Christians are going to respond, well, that's a moral law, and so that's still in force. But that doesn't work because the division of the laws of the Hebrew Bible into moral and ceremonial, or moral and ceremonial and civil, is post-biblical. There is no such categorization anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. It was a categorization that Christians invented starting in the 3rd century CE in order to legitimize them holding on to the legislation they wanted to hold on to and abandoning the legislation they wanted to abandon. So that's not a legitimate framework. Now, other Christians are going to respond, well, this is all about the created order, and so that's still the same, and so that is still in force. Again, that's a non-biblical conceptual framework that is being imposed upon the text arbitrarily so that Christians can rationalize why they should be able to assert the legislation that they find useful and abandon the legislation that they don't. So if you're a Christian, this doesn't apply to you. If you don't live inside the land of Israel, this doesn't apply to you. And that brings up the third concern. What is actually going on in Leviticus 18 and 20? In Leviticus 18, we have a bunch of sexual acts that are prohibited, and these sexual acts are all about inappropriate relationships that are thought to generate a kind of metaphysical contamination or pollution that pollutes the land. And so it has to be purged, or the creation of that contamination has to be avoided. In Leviticus 18, we have the prohibition on the one who is in the driver's seat regarding these sexual acts. And this is an important caveat. Sexuality in the ancient world was not about consensual mutual relationships shared between two people. It was about one person doing something to another person, specifically someone higher up on a socially conventionalized hierarchy of domination and penetration, doing something to someone lower down on that hierarchy, whose agency didn't really matter. Only the agency of the person higher up on the hierarchy mattered. And so in Leviticus 18, those prohibitions are being imposed upon the person who is higher up in the hierarchy, which is why almost entirely it is men who are being addressed. There's only one sexual act in which a woman is prohibited from engaging in an act with someone lower down on the hierarchy, and that is where the other agent is an animal, because that's the only kind of sexual relationship where a woman is actually higher up on that social hierarchy of domination and penetration. Now, Leviticus 20 is a little different. All the laws in Leviticus 20 are actually expanding on what's going on in Leviticus 18, probably a later editorial expansion, where they are saying that both parties must die. And there's an argument to make that this is a textual change. A lot of these passages begin in the singular and then rather awkwardly shift to the plural in a way that the Hebrew really doesn't like to do. But what Leviticus 20 is doing is suggesting that the only way to purge this contaminant, this pollutant from the land so that the land does not vomit you out is by killing both partners in the sexual act, whether both partners are human or both partners are not. And so the agency of the partner who is taking the receptive role, who is lower down on the hierarchy, isn't even a consideration. They still must die, however, because they were a party to that inappropriate sexual act. And so why is it wrong for two men to engage in same-sex intercourse according to these passages? Well, it's because two freeborn male citizens are supposed to be on the same level of that hierarchy. and to subordinate one is inappropriate. And we have a number of other indications that concern for maintaining the integrity of that hierarchy are paramount. For instance, in Mesopotamia, we have references to a man subordinating another man sexually, robbing that other man of his masculinity, his vitality, his power. We have references to men who are on the bottom during sex with their own wives, otherwise totally appropriate sexual relationships, being robbed of their vitality, of their masculinity, of their power for up to a month, according to some Mesopotamian omens, because to be on the bottom is to take a submissive role. So in that hierarchy, it is inappropriate for the man to take a submissive role. And we have a similar concern expressed in a Talmudic text in early Judaism, where it says that if a man is on the bottom during sex with his wife, he will be stricken with diarrhea. And this is also, interestingly enough, the impetus for Lilith's abandonment of the Garden of Eden in the alphabet of Ben Sirah from the 7th to 10th centuries CE. This is where we get this idea that Adam's first wife was Lilith, and she gets upset and storms out of the Garden of Eden because she says, I want to be on top. And Adam says, you're not fit to be on top. Only I am fit to be on top. So from the 2nd millennium BCE all the way through to the end of the 1st millennium CE, across ancient Southwest Asia, we have this idea that sexual acts must honor this social hierarchy of domination and penetration. So in addition to the fact that it has no relevance to Christians today, the undergirding moral concern has no relevance to us today, because we don't accept, or at least we shouldn't accept, this notion that there is a socially conventionalized hierarchy of domination, and sexual positions and sexual partners have to honor that hierarchy. Otherwise, we are creating a metaphysical contaminant that pollutes the land, and there is the threat that we might be vomited out of the land. Nobody accepts that anymore. The only reason these passages are still deployed as weapons against the LGBTQ plus community is because that is an identity marker that is useful for boundary maintenance, that is useful for structuring power and values, that is useful for right-wing authoritarian identity politics. And you just need to get over that.